I'm wondering how you can track the success of these programs. I mean, is there a good follow-up so that you can see, oh yes, they do have jobs now. They are closing the wealth gap.
I think there are lots of measures. For example, if you look right now, the home ownership is the greatest source of wealth for the typical American household, and that includes blacks, Latinos, non-Hispanic, whites, Asians, households generally. This foreclosure crisis is having a disproportionate and devastating effect on people of color, communities of color, because they were the targets for these unfair, deceptive, predatory loans that lending institutions recklessly pursued over the last decade. As a result of being the disproportionate targets for these unfair products, they are now disproportionately going into foreclosure. And so one of a unique intervention is to actually help those neighborhoods that were most heavily targeted with these unfair and deceptive products and where the foreclosure rates are concentrated. Now, if you do that, yes, there is a way to measure, because you know exactly who's been affected, you know how many households have been taken advantage of, you know who needs help in terms of restructuring their mortgages, and you know the corollary damage that's been done as a result of this foreclosure crisis. And so if you have special interventions, this is what I meant by special interventions, that go into those neighborhoods, relying a lot on the nonprofit community that is there, which is really the community infrastructure, then yes, we can measure, because we will know exactly how many households we're helping. We will know if our interventions are successful. We can measure it by in terms of the stability of home ownership. We can measure it by the amount of new small business job growth that's created. We can measure it by the median incomes of the families rising. And so it's not a mystery how to do these things. We know how to do it. And the unfortunate part is that we've had to invest so much money in trying to prop up a financial institution that went just absolutely reckless in its behavior. And if we had invested only maybe 1% of that, 1% in terms of closing the racial wealth gaps each year, we would be really far along in closing that gap. Most people, when they hear about the TARP funds and the support for banks, they hear the $700 billion plan as if that's how much has gone to prop up the financial institutions. As of this day, over 10 trillion with a T, 10 trillion worth of investments and loans have been funneled to the financial system to prop it up, and it's still on life support. And so we have always had the financial resources to do the right thing and make America more competitive. We haven't done it. Now is the time, in the depth of this crisis, to really get serious, not only about resolving that crisis, but addressing some of these age-old problems that allowed that problem to occur, because had these communities not been marginalized, segregated, and financially vulnerable, much of this subprime lending would never have occurred.
Let me just ask you this. In your perfect world, what's going to happen to close the wealth gap, Jim?
When you say my perfect world, and then you said what's going to happen. So I don't think my perfect world's going to happen.
What could happen? What would you like to see
happen? In
happen?
the best of all worlds, what I'd like to see is the economic recovery dollars focused to communities that have three characteristics. One, that have high unemployment. I mean high unemployment. The areas that have, and when I say high, I mean disproportionate levels of unemployment. Second goes to areas that have been disproportionately targeted for these unfair and deceptive products, which means high foreclosure areas. And third, areas that have historically been underfunded in terms of their infrastructure. The reason for that is that those dollars would go to people and communities that really need those dollars. They wouldn't be channeled into savings accounts. They wouldn't be channeled back into the stock market now that some people are seeing it rising and may be thinking, oh, this is a good time to get in. It would be going to people who have little if no disposable income. When they spend those dollars come back into the economy and actually trigger more robust economic stimulus than giving it to a middle-income household that really doesn't need that $400 check or that $800 check. The second thing is, because the centerpiece of this crisis is foreclosures, channeling it to areas that have the highest foreclosures would do the most immediate positive impact of stemming the collapse of house prices, which is really what is triggering a lot of additional losses for these banks and triggering a lot more foreclosures. And then the third piece is, everyone's been talking about infrastructure. It's nice to, build another highway, a lane of highways, and paint bridges, but it would be more productive to go to these areas that have had high infrastructure needs and fix those immediate infrastructure needs, like the broken street lights that make the community safe at night, like the broken sidewalks that are dangerous for children. Really getting into the sewer systems and the underground utilities and making those communities more efficient, maybe laying fiber optic cable to help bring them into the knowledge economy, really investing in a smart way, not just painting a bridge.
Making them nicer places to live.
That's correct. And I think for Asian American and Pacific Islander communities and other communities of color, I really think that we should sort of flip the strategy on its head. Many of the strategies have been very broad-based, but similarly to what Jim was saying, I agree that we should be really targeting our resources towards culturally and linguistically appropriate strategies that do target communities of color. The products that were problematic were targeted to our communities, and so now the strategies and the solutions to fix that should also be targeted to those communities. With regards to Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, oftentimes we are not considered to be a high priority community because of our statistics, basically saying that it looks like we're doing better or as well as the general population. So my perfect world would be that policymakers and decision makers had full and perfect information about how the crisis is impacting specifically Southeast Asian communities, what's happening in the Cambodian community, what's happening in the Hmong community and the Vietnamese community and the Bangladeshi community, because all of our statistics that we look at with regards to educational attainment or homeownership rates, their statistics in those communities look more similar to African American and Latinos than other Asian Americans. And so I think that those are the kinds of stories, those are the kinds of statistics that I would like to see integrated into the solutions that are created.
Another thing in the best of all worlds, in my view, it goes back to something I said earlier, which is having policymakers really understand why it's important to make sure every American is achieving their greatest maximum human potential. Because once they know that and start helping their constituents understand that, then we can start putting a lot of the noise and the rhetoric that divides us behind us and move forward. But we will never move forward as a country and as a nation if people really don't understand the history of America, how things got the way they are, and why it's important and imperative to change them. Because what they'll be hearing and feeling is that group wants an advantage on us, and it's unfair. They've had the same access we have, and don't they understand the value of hard work and dedication? That's why my family's doing well, and that's why in this economic disastrous circumstance, we need help as much as they. They should have worked hard. They wouldn't be so far behind. And as long as you have that thinking without any knowledge or understanding of the history of federal policy intervention and its direct role in creating these gaps, then I don't think that we're going to succeed. And equally important, having people understand that even if you didn't understand your history, it's like being on a football team together. Everyone has to perform, and anyone who's not performing then is a weakness for your team, and at some point you're going to lose because you don't have enough people who can really play at that peak performance. So high performance, having people excel to the greatest extent of their human potential is really important for every American, and policymakers need to help America understand we all gain when we are all at the top of our game.
Lisa, Jim, thank you for your time.